that could be said the same about coins as well. And sometimes when people get really fanatic about it, then it turns quote unquote cult like.
Welcome to Beyond the Beat, a podcast by Chain Story, the agency to elevate your status in crypto. I'm your host, Pedro, and every week we'll be talking to the people in crypto media. We'll be telling their stories, their failures, their lessons, and whatever tips or tricks they've got up their sleeves.
Yeah, welcome in everybody to another episode of Beyond the Beat. I'm super excited to chat to Erika Lee from Decrypt today. How you doing, Erika? Thanks for coming on.
Good. I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Excited. It's Friday today, so I'm excited to get the weekend going. I'm sure you do as well. Do you have any exciting plans for the next few
Yeah.
days?
So right now in LA, it's LA Tech Week, and I kind of haven't been going to any of the events, so I'll just go to one over the weekend and see how that goes.
Cool. What's the event about? Aside from tech, obviously.
It's just it's called like a wind down party because I guess this whole week people have been going to events, so it's more of like a chill like happy hour type thing. Um, I don't know if it's necessarily crypto centered, but there will be crypto people there. A lot of people building in AI as well.
Interesting. I feel like everybody nowadays is like marrying the AI crypto thing. Like it's
Yeah,
kind of obvious, like, but yeah, I feel like everybody who I talk to nowadays has something to do in crypto, has something to do, or is like looking towards AI in some way, which I am as well, to be fair. Do you think about AI a lot?
do you
And
use
without
that?
diving too far into.
Do you use AI in your writing, or what do you mean that you're involved in it in crypto?
No, I've been like I use AI for a bit of research and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And when it comes to like my writing itself, I might use like the Hemingway app and a few things like that. I haven't like properly dove into using many AI tools yet, but I do think about it. And like I think about it more as like an abstract philosophical thing, like how it's going to affect us and what it's going to do. And I know that I should be learning how to
Yeah.
use these tools, and like how they're going
hmm
to, like, people that know how to use it are going to become better writers or faster writers or whatever it is. But yeah, I still haven't properly jumped in. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see where writers fall on this argument because a lot of purists are like, no, real writing, you shouldn't have any AI involved. But other people who are, more open minded say that it could supplement. And so I still am figuring out how I feel about it as well because um, I can see both sides. So.
Which side do you lean to, though? Have you been increasingly looking towards using a little bit more, or are you still on the fence completely that you're not even trying it out?
Yeah, so in my previous job, we were encouraged to use AI, and then when we used it, we would have to put a disclaimer on the bottom saying, oh, like this was written in collaboration with ChatGPT with a staff member. But I do remember there were times where I did research and a lot of the facts were incorrect because um, they would bundle a bunch of facts together and they weren't necessarily true. So I was writing about like the first NFT that would be sent to the moon. And it was like a project where people put a bunch of um, like art pieces of artwork and sent it to the moon. But um, I think the AI got it mixed up with some other things. And so they mixed it with people who went to the moon and like mixed it up together. And I think it's called hallucinations in AI. And so I think maybe it just is not as developed yet, but I feel like that part isn't the best. But maybe, if people want someone to help them think of like a synonym, but they can't think of which synonym to use in a sentence, then yeah, maybe that stuff could be really helpful.
What did you think when like your editors, what I don't know if you can say which newsroom you were working in, but what did you think when they said to you, like, yeah, we want you to use AI, and sure, we're going to use disclaimers, but we want you to, yeah, start using this in your stories?
I think it was framed as something that was really positive. It's like, oh, we're really like cutting edge. We're really um, using this to optimize the workflow, so you could, spend more time doing stuff that's more long form and research heavy, and the AI will just help with, the daily hits that don't take that much lift. So I think if you think about it like that, I don't think that's that bad. It just, but there's always that fear that writers have, especially with newsroom cuts and less and less journalists being able to have full-time jobs. That I feel like that's something that's a concern as well.
Do you think that, so you side with the idea that AI is definitely going to take journalists' jobs?
No, I don't think that fully, but I do think
But I'm on
that
my way
it
there.
is. I'm on my way there. I will just say that you can't fully replace a person's thoughts, but AI does help with like transcribing and sentence structure. Um, so yeah, wait, what are your thoughts?
I think it's not going to. I think it might replace like the lowest rung of writers, but I think it's not necessarily going to replace entirely the whole writing or journalistic profession. I think that people that know how to use it and
Yeah,
can harness it are going to like have a substantial edge. And then I think media outlets that also learn how to use it, and I'm not entirely sure what it means to like know how to use it from like an outlet perspective. I guess
mhm,
from a journalist perspective, it
mhm,
can it I might have a better grasp on what it might mean, but like from an outlet perspective, I have no idea. But I do think that the companies that like understand that it's coming and are starting to like experiment with it are going to succeed in whatever way is possible. But then, I mean, there's the other side of the argument that, like you say, like you can't replace a human's mind, and like most people don't know, but human generated content like outranks AI generated content by an insane amount on Google searches and things like that. And so I think this race to be first, even though it's like AI generated, isn't exactly the route that I would take if I was the head of a newsroom. But I'm not the head of a newsroom. I'm the
mhm.
lowest of the newsroom. So, I mean, take that for what it is.
I think, yeah, I think Condé Nast did a deal with OpenAI and gave them their entire catalog of articles across all publications, right? Or was that Time? I think it was Condé Nast.
I think so as well. And yeah, I'm unsure what it's gonna what how it's all going to be. But I do think that people who aren't using it, and like kudos to your team or to your newsroom that was like encouraged it. I do think that that there's going to be like an early adopter wave that's going to get that upper edge. And I don't know if you still use it or not, but yeah, it's interesting. Um but yeah, how do you I want to hear about like your writing process. I ask a lot of
Okay.
journalists there and this, and I'm always intrigued by like the writing process. So, like moving away from how AI might affect it, how do you actually go through the ideation of say a story, an idea, and then into the eventual writing? And how does it go to actually like sit down and write it? I have to sit every day at 9 a.m. and start like punching out words or whenever it like the inspiration hits. Why don't you walk me through that?
Yeah, I think when I have an idea, a lot of times I find my ideas while scrolling the Twitter timeline, seeing what either the arguments are or what the trends are, um, and kind of seeing what I could do to build upon that or just find out more about. And then if I have an idea, I'll usually kind of like have a rough pitch to send it to my editor, um, and usually have one or two people to interview for it. And then after if I get it approved, then after I interview someone, um, I kind of write around the transcriptions. I get the transcription first, and I did have the outline, but I like picking the quotes that I like the most, and then going back and seeing how I can write around using them, and then seeing if there's anything else from the conversation that I can add. So that's pretty much my process. I don't know what other people have been saying, but I would love to hear about yours and what other people have been saying.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question for you first though. Is so you like structure it quotes first, and then those are like the meat, and then you start adding in around it, did I get that right?
No, I have the thesis first, and then after I do the quotes and then write around it.
Okay, cool. And interesting. And then do you find like do you struggle much when it comes to like sitting down and starting with like the headline and the subheader and then the lead and then just like moving your way off? Or have you built in this like writing habit where you can just like sort of word vomit, or maybe you get it right on the first draft? I mean, you might be gifted like that. I don't know. I'm not, at least. But to like punch out words and like immediately.
I think in terms of like headline, I usually have one written first, and after I finish the whole story, I read it again and see if there's a better way to summarize it in the headline. So it's kind of like you have the rough idea first, and then later you reiterate it. So I will say it really just depends on the topic. Like if I feel really passionate about it, maybe it comes out naturally, but I would say it depends. What about you?
I do the same. I sort of drop a tentative headline, and then like 10 out of 10 times I'll have to change it at the end of the story because it's changed substantially. um but I used to leave the headline for last, and then I got into the habit of like writing it first, and I feel like that's helped my writing a lot because it's given me like some sort of north star to move towards, even if the north star just like ends up like completely in a different position. Before, I used to just like start writing without much, yeah, like thought aimlessly, and I feel like that's something
Hmm.
that's really helped me out to sort of hone in on like going through the actual writing.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess we're aligned on that.
The My writing process is, yeah, pretty similar, at least from like the pitching side of things. So I'll find an interesting topic, I'll pitch it to my editors. My editors will either green light it or we'll like ping pong back and forth, like, okay, this is interesting, this makes sense. Can you get any quotes, any comments, stuff like that? And then I'm a very like word vomit kind of guy. I'll like throw down as much as I can in one go. Like just all the basic ideas of what I have, notions, thoughts, opinions, all that sort of stuff, and just like throw it down. And then from there, I'll have maybe like step back a second, and then I'll step back into it and then like look at it and realize it's a complete disaster and it needs like heavy surgery. And then I'll just like start rewriting and editing and just like changing things up and things like that. But yeah, i'm I've been gifted with not the need for perfection, if that like makes any sense. Like, I'm not a perfectionist at all. I do strive for like making my writing great and as good as possible, but like perfection isn't something that I usually strive for. And so I will just like vomit things, and then after that I'll start to like, I won't spend any time trying to make it perfect or on the first go. Sometimes I will be inspired, and then I will like write out something really nice on the first go. But yeah, I tend to word vomit, and then from there sort of move on. But then it also depends, I guess, on like the the deadline. Like if I've got a breaking news story, then I'll try and like hone it in
Mhm.
one go, so it's not like a train wreck, because then yeah, obviously you need to edit it and get it out as quickly as possible. But if it's something longer, some sort of feature or investigation, then I can allow myself a little bit more leeway in that process.
Yeah, have you ever heard the quote, write drunk, edit sober? So I feel like that's a good strategy you're going for, and wanting everything to be perfect is a blocker for writing anyway. It's like paralysis. So I like your method. I think when I do more like creative writing, like on the side, that's how I go about it as well. Just like brain dumping and then looking at it after.
What sort of creative writing are you doing on the side?
I used to do a lot more, but now that, my whole life is crypto, I do a lot less, but I like to write like fiction and like personal essay, just based upon stuff that happened in my life. And so I think that's something that I've always been really passionate about and first inspired me to go into writing, because I don't think anyone as a kid is like, I want to be a crypto writer. There was
Maybe
always
kids
something that
nowadays are
made
thinking that
them.
though.
Maybe nowadays for sure. But for me, like I just loved like sort of writing in diaries, and I loved the first person narrative format, and I also just loved reading fiction growing up and even still now. So that's something that I still like to keep um, sharp when I have free time, especially. And I feel like that is more centered upon how I feel like emotionally, whereas doing crypto work, like you're not always having the opportunity to insert a personal narrative into it.
Would you? This is a question that I've had a lot, like both to myself and I've asked a bunch of people. What do you think about like inserting personal narratives or personal opinions into the articles that like journalists write? Are you against, or I mean, I suppose it's dependent, but are you for or against it?
I think that's a good question, and I think I would lean towards yes, I like it. So, for example, I wrote this story about how I went into the D Gods Telegram, and it was more so I wanted to learn about the internet culture and how projects have like that cult like mentality, and I think writing about it from kind of like a personal perspective was more effective because you could bring the reader along like with you on the journey, and it just seemed more personal and more fun to read. I mean, I know that a lot of journalists, they see things differently, right? Like some are like, oh, I should never insert myself in the story because it's about the story and it's not about myself. I'm just a vehicle to tell the story. Whereas some people are like, oh, I'm using myself to guide uh, the reader to the story. I guess it just really depends. Like if there's really no use for having yourself there, then I don't see the need to just randomly do that. But I do think like
Disposable
when people
journalism.
do like if people do like event coverage, I feel like it's always fun to have someone do kind of like a live blog and like add a couple of like personal thoughts. And I think that's how a lot of journalists become really specific media personalities too, because people like their specific voice. And with Twitter being such a big part of a journalist's personal brand now, a lot of that is personal thoughts and tweets, and I think that really contributes to the writing and the overall brand. And so I'm not against it. I do think there's a time and place for it though. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do think that there's definitely a time and place. I would appreciate. I do I do find myself gravitating more towards journalists that give their opinions, or me reading journalists that do give their opinions, because there's a reason why I read them. And if I want to just like a straight story. Sometimes I might just get it going back to like AI. I might just get it from AI and then that'll be it. And I do think that there's like the idea of like an unbiased journalist that doesn't say anything and just shares the news is kind of like utopian. And so, yeah, I do think that like I personally read people who I find are not only reporting on things that I'm interested in, but also are like telling it the way that they see it and they feel it and they experienced it. And I find that there's a lot more edge to that, and I find that's a lot more interesting. And I think that just the world is changing. That feels like that I feel like we're going in like two separate directions at the end of the day. Like there's going to be like a space for people to read journalists because of how they report on things and like their opinions. And then you're going to have this like very sterile AI, just like blanket, oh, this is what happened. And that's pretty much it, which I suppose is fine. Um, but yeah, maybe I want a little bit more sauce in the stories that I'm reading. But I do see, I do agree that there's like a time and place for everything. And I think that like when it comes to, because you do a lot of reporting on the cultural side of things and like digital arts and things like that, and I think that there's a much bigger space and a much bigger like yeah, freedom for journalists in that specific sector to tell things how they see it.
Definitely. I think if you're like talking about something that happened in the regulatory space or something that's more serious, I feel like there's really no need. You just say what happened, and that's probably the most important.
Is that why you gravitated towards the cultural side of things? Because like I find regulation sometimes interesting, but then at the same time, like you say,
Yeah.
it can be very dry and like just super
I never said
straightforward.
it was try. You
No,
added
I
that.
said I was no, I'm pinning that on myself. That's completely my words. I added that into like
Yeah.
the statement. Um but yeah, do you see it like yeah, is that why you gravitated towards the like more reporting on the cultural side of things?
Yeah, I guess I've never really thought about it like that. I just thought the cultural side was so interesting, and that really affects, how everything ends up going. I know that a lot of people think that might be like the more like fun or unserious part. But if you see even now, like the Bitcoin, most of the transactions on Bitcoin are like meme coins, right? And no matter how you say like you want to escape that, like it's becoming a big part of culture, and you can't really ignore those things that happen because they do drive like the meta and like where all the money is going. And so eventually, even if you want to ignore like meme coins, like you will have to face them eventually. So yeah, no, stuff like that. And I also just think it's fun. Like as a child, like I spent so much time on the internet, whether it's like playing Neopets or like editing like my MySpace or going on Tumblr. And so those pockets of the world and of the internet have always been really interesting to me. And so this is just kind of like a different form of it. Um, and I like it. So yeah.
Do you think that this like the appearance because it's or like this huge appearance of like meme coins is much more aligned with like the underlying idea of like of crypto, or it's just like a broadening of people that are part of the internet culture, like you say, that are sort of now having a space in crypto?
I would say it's probably not the second one. What would you say for the first one again?
Like this is more like meme coins are more aligned with like the idea of just like what crypto is or what it was built to be, or I don't know if
Um,
built to be, but like what the sort of underlying ethos, going a little bit beyond just like the idea of like decentralization and censorship resistant, but just more like that sort of like hardcore online culture.
I think part of it is I wouldn't say like I will say like it is what it is, right? Like it is like like a lot of it is shitty, like, and a lot of it we shouldn't pay attention to. So I won't like try to give it a deeper meaning than it is. But there are pockets, especially the coins that have long term communities, not like the pump and dumps that only last like a day or an hour, but specific ones like Pepe or Mog or Whiff, like those have like long term communities, and they've really like built like like lifelong friends or specific NFT communities, like Bored Ape or Pudgy Penguins, who have actually formed cult like communities. Then I would say those are more aligned with what you were saying about like internet culture and what it's evolved to. But a large percent of that is just means nothing. So yeah.
So to use this time, I will be using your words. I won't be injecting any of mine. But like, do you think that the the cult, like, you need a sort of culty vibe, so to speak, to be able to create these like longer standing communities around these meme coins, or that's just like a part of it and not necessarily a need?
um I think I think the way people say cult makes it sound derogatory, but if you think about almost everything, whether it's in history or culture or even religion, it's just a group of people rallying around something that they believe in. And so that could be said the same about coins as well. And sometimes when people get really fanatic about it, then it turns quote unquote cult like. But I would just say it just means a group of people who believe and are aligned with one specific mission. So, I mean, that could be like, I don't know, like Christianity too, or something else. And people could say that's a cult too. I will say that having that sort of like passion does help, because everyone, no matter how different they are, can agree on one thing and have that mission.
And I suppose like it's got something to do with like the linguistics of it as well. Like cult comes is in the word culture, so there's definitely something that's
Yeah,
like deeply aligned.
that's a great point. I don't I don't know if it like how that came about. If you're a linguistics expert, I would love to know more. But people love
I'm
like tweeting stuff like I put the cult in culture and stuff like that. So makes sense. Makes sense.
I'm not gonna go out there and say that I thought of it, like I just thought of it, and I'm definitely not going to claim myself a linguistics expert, as although I do really like language and I do really like how language exists and morphs and changes stuff and does different things. But yeah, like when you were saying that it's not, because you're right, like there is a derogatory like theme to speaking about cults and cult like things, but when you think about it, if it's just people like missioning on a specific goal and it's part of like just the culture, and you can think about it like maybe even, I don't know, like bikers, like bicyclists, they got like a cult like behavior who always go out and they love their bicycles, and they might have like idols that they aspire to be, and that's what their community is all about, and nobody looks at that like it's something weird. I wonder if like the hyper financialization of it has something to do with like the reticence of acknowledging this as like an quote unquote okay thing outside of the
Mm,
community itself, you know?
mm. I'm also just thinking about in cults the negative parts, like the punishment part, right? Like if you do have the mission, but if one day you stray from it, then you get reprimanded. So like for example, if you sell or if you say something bad about like the token, or even like if you're like in church and you don't follow what you're supposed to be doing, then the cult kind of like turns on you, right? And so that, I guess you could apply that to in crypto as someone who's selling, right? They're like dumping the bags.
Traders, absolute traders. Do you think that there's like, do you think that there is some sort of cultish behavior in the media? Like I'm sort of like piecing these things. I've never actually thought about this, but like since there is so much cultish behavior, I guess in Bitcoin and crypto in general, I'm just wondering, have you thought about it from like a media perspective, or something along the lines of like specific, because I feel like journalists sometimes are a weird like community, if you can call it that. I struggle to think of journalists as a community. And I was chatting about this with some PR friends of mine, because PR people, for example, have a community that's much more established and like stronger. And I do think that there's like a different sort of energy there. But when it comes to journalists, it feels a little bit more solitary. It feels a little bit more like each one pushing in their own direction. And like that sort of cultish behavior doesn't necessarily exist. I don't know if you agree, or you've even thought about this before.
Yeah, I've never thought about this before, but I'm thinking about it right now, and I think, yeah, I think there's some truth to what you said, especially because I feel like there are just many different beats. Maybe journalists rally around different specific beats that they write on, like, oh, I'm a crypto journalist, or I'm a broadcast journalist, or I like writing specifically about like Asian communities, because I know that like when I was more involved in those communities, like I was really involved in the Asian American Journalists Association, and in some ways like that was like a lot like a, I wouldn't say cult, but it was like a very tight knit group of people. Um, and we would go to the same, like, there would be a conference every year, and people would go to that, like, religiously, you know. Um, and I think, or like, you know, there's like the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, or Black journalists. I think people are, you know, rallying around, you know, their, you know, culture, race, and ethnicity, and how, you know, these minority groups are covered in the media, so they have that. But if I think like if in terms of like being like a freelance writer, or someone who, you know, is just, you know, writing for themselves, I do think it's more solitary, because and that's something that I even thought about for freelance resources. I know that there are a lot more now, but there's just not enough people who are kind of like, a lot is really gate kept. You have to figure out like, if when you're like pitching other outlets, like when I was first starting out, like a lot of it I had to learn through trial and error. There was no one that had like a guide that was like, this is how you pitch, and this is the best way to do it, and these are all the emails, and you kind of had to like scour the web yourself for that. And now there are a lot more resources, with people going like, hey, this place has a call for pitches, like email this editor, the rate is this much. But even like with journalists, you know, sharing rates, like I do think there could be more of a community aspect to it. Maybe the community does exist and I'm just not part of it, but I do know what you mean by that. But yeah.
Are you in the ACJR by any chance? Have you heard of them?
ACJR. Is it the Telegram group?
That is the Telegram group, which kind of saddens me that that's like the immediate connection, but at the same time, it's the reality, because that is the immediate, like,
Wait, what
one
do
of
you,
the.
was it more than a Telegram group, or?
It's technically more like we also do like webinars and in real life meetups, and there's a mentorship program going on. So there is like a few other programs, but the majority of people know it as like the Telegram group, which.
Okay, I'm in the Telegram group, but I didn't know there was other things. I don't think people have talked in it for quite a while, but I would still love to be more involved if you're part of it. Just let me know if you guys have an event.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of events, and we've got a lot of stuff happening all the time, and yeah, more than happy to yeah,
Oh,
share some
all
of
the
the stuff that
time
we're
too.
doing.
All the
I
time.
mean,
I would.
there's like we have like, for example, a budget for like members who want to do in real life event, like media events wherever they are, for like journalists, whether that's in crypto or like a little bit beyond, like satellite stuff like that. And then we've got, so we do like try and encourage journalists to get together, or media people to get together. Just
Mhm.
sometimes it sort of falls under the radar. um but like,
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, no, I'll happily share that after this, a few ideas and things, that, because I'm also planning a few things myself along the lines of helping to create better ways for journalists to pitch, and with writing series and stuff like that. And so, yeah, happy to
That's
share some
awesome.
ideas and ping pong some stuff.
You're doing
Um,
some important work.
I mean, I'm trying to. I don't know if I'm succeeding in any which way, but I'm like trying to think of different ways to yeah, add something to the, like, our profession or our industry in any ways. Um, but yeah, I'm glad that you touched on the idea of like freelance journal or freelancing, because you, like, for example, I know that you tweeted not long ago that like a Pew Research study about a third of journalists nowadays are freelancers. I'm
Yeah,
wondering if that number has gone, because that was from 2023, and I'm wondering if that's maybe gone up, and I'm sure that it's probably going to continue going up.
yeah.
And I remember you also wrote, and I fully agree, that freelancers need better rates. Uh,
Yeah, thank you for remembering. Yeah, I subscribe to a couple newsletters. So one, I don't know if you know Study Hall, but
I
it's a
don't.
pretty well-known newsletter, Study Hall XYZ. It's not crypto centered, but they do have like some tech components. But I've subscribed to that since like I graduated from college, um, and if you're kind of like a journalist that isn't doing well financially, then they have like a different rate. And I think that's really great. So, in addition to a list of pitches, fellowships, and programs that writers can apply for, they also have like a bunch of resources too. And so they have like kind of like a state of journalism report that they write about as well. And so that's where I got that study, where because they cited the Pew Research study, and so that was like really sad to read because that just makes freelancing even more competitive, right? And so people who don't have full time jobs, they don't have health insurance, and then they just want to make a couple $100 from an article, and then one call for pitches gets like thousands of people. Like I don't know, it's really hard out here for people who love writing for a living. So
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and it feels like there's been a sort of race to the bottom when it comes to freelancing as well, because since it's so competitive, at the end of the day, like, the only way for, unless you're a really good journalist or a really good writer, or you package something together, or you create some sort of like distinctive offer, like, if you're just going into that pool of people pitching for a specific story, at the end of the day, like, obviously quality is going to win sometimes, but a lot of the times, like, just the pure price factor of something might be like an indicator. And I think that media outlets are starting, or have been picking up on this for years, like, and have been slowly dropping rates, because they know that there is going to be like a quality writer who will be willing maybe to like turn down their what should be their rate, just because they're in need of like life. So yeah, I'm
yeah.
always, yeah, I'm disheartened as well by like the reality of freelance. And I don't think freelancers, I think freelancers are just responding to like market demands and the reality of how
Mhm.
things go. I don't think that they have like a specific responsibility in all this. But, and I'm not entirely, like, I have ideas on how you can stand out as a freelance writer,
Mhm.
but they require going a little bit outside like the purely journalistic in profession.
What do you mean? What are some of them? Is it like having exclusive interviews or
I think a part of it is having exclusive interviews. I think a part of it is also like some negotiating tactics when it comes to like sitting down with editors for negotiating sort of package deals. I think offering services that go beyond just like writing cultural articles, and I think going into like newsletters, or offering a different set of services that are also like part of the written word is a way to do it. I think like research studies or things like that are also an interesting like
Mhm.
package or product that people can put together, that can also like stand you apart from like the purely, this is an article and this is the pitch and that's it. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
like at like doing photography or having like on camera video content, especially as you know that becomes more popular on all social platforms. Then I feel like there's always a need for that.
Do you think like video is going to end up phasing out, not entirely, but is going to phase out like the written word? I think that there is that shift, and I think there's always going to be a place for written, whether that's stories or journalism or just newsletters or whatever it is. But do you think it's going to come to a point where it's just like video is the prevailing of all prevailings, and that's just how people are going to consume the majority of their stories and content?
Mm, I don't know. I think it depends what kind of video content, because there is like short form video content with the captions, and in a way you are like reading, right? And I feel like that works the best for people because you can't always, like, I don't know, maybe you're at work or maybe you're in a quiet place and you're scrolling and you want to watch this video but you can't like turn the volume up. Like, wouldn't you want to just read an article? But those captions like really really help. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, we're seeing like LinkedIn integrate like their version of Reels. We're seeing Twitter push video more. We're seeing Instagram push video more. I do see it being the dominant thing, but even at the end of the day, like people who make video, they want AI to transcribe the words, you know. So
Good
there's
point.
always going to be room for both. But I do think, you know, the platforms that we consume, they do have a lot of the control of what they're pushing because they are, you know, in charge of it. And so I think they are really pushing video at this moment and streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, despite being a big consumer of like video and audio content. But I'm not entirely sure like that's the way that I mean, I understand like from those platforms perspective why that's what they're pushing, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure as a consumer of content that that's I'm too happy about that. But hey, I'm just a
You're
single tiny consumer here, so
you're like in a minority, I think. I did see one of your tweets, I think it was yesterday, that people should fund more long form journalism
mm,
and or investigative journalism, right? Both you said, um, and that's so true. And I just feel like usually people, like if I was ahead of a newsroom and I was like, you know, looking for traffic and I have all these KPIs to meet, I would find value in investigative journalism, but it wouldn't be the first place that I would um, prioritize just because like even when newsrooms do cuts, they often cut like the investigative unit first, or they cut the art unit first, you know, or the diversity unit first. And I know that really sucks, but yeah, no, I agree with you. I love like reading a good investigation, and I wish there were more.
yeah. Do you have any ideas on how we can like bring that back, or not? I don't know if bring that back is the word, but like because this has become like an underlying conversation in every conversation I've been having, which is like the need for more investigation and like how we help or how we can do more stuff to bring more investigative journalism. Because I like you're right, news like outlets will always cut the investigative side of things first or the op-ed side of things first and like favor traffic over anything else. And but like investigations at the end of the day are one of the most key parts of like journalism and revealing stuff that's happening in an industry, but everybody fades it and nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah, it's so true.
And this is, I think this goes back also to like journalists. Like I was talking to Cass from Protos about this, um, and there I think there's this goes back to what we were talking about. Like journalists are there's a lack of community for journalists sometimes, because he was saying he was trying to get like a group of journalists to like make some sort of investigative collective of sorts or something like that, but he was struggling to get either journalists to jump on board or for outlets to sign on to allow them to cooperate with journalists from competing news sites. And so there's also that sort of tension there from the journalist perspective to just like, all right, I'm also going to like work with my competitor or quote unquote competitor, but like with my colleague from a competing outlet, and research this and publish it somewhere else. So I think that also creates this sort of weird situation. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's become a constant. Yeah.
I mean, there's people like ZachXBT who do, citizen journalism, and he might not be writing articles, but he's doing a lot of investigations, and he keeps himself afloat through donations primarily. And so I think that's really interesting too, because that's like a different type of like journalism. But he has been exposing a lot of things, and even more so than journalists from newsrooms.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting case. Like, I think the anonymous side of things, I don't know. Obviously I'm a huge fan because he's like doing God's work in our industry, which is really needed. But yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday actually, like, because I find tipping or donation is a very unsustainable business model, you know? But I was thinking about it as I was tipping like the girl at the cafe for my coffee. I was thinking, and this is like a random thought, like branching out. What can we learn from like the service industry? Because they have the tipping game down to a T. Like they know that you can't go in, like you're in the US, you know what it's like to not be able to, it's like scorned on, or it's like high treason to not tip somebody when they serve you. Like, how did they master that? And how can we learn to master that as well, so that tipping can be something when it comes to like reporting or investigation or something like that? I don't know. I was thinking about this random thought while I was walking through the airport yesterday.
Yeah, I think people get really mad when there are paywalls on articles, or you're reading an article and then there's a pop-up that's like, please help us. Like, um, I don't know, people really don't like that. And it's like you do that with like coffee and stuff. I don't know. That's a really good point. And hopefully someone can can find a solution to that. I mean, maybe the solution is just like, I don't know. I was gonna say subscription model, but I don't think that's like working that well either. So we'll have to have a think on that and come back to it.
Yeah, that'll be part of our sequel to this conversation. Once we think about different ways that we can get the alpha from waiters and waitresses and service workers and use them in our favor.
It's only in America though. Like when I went to like, Australia, like Europe, like no one's forcing you to do that. So um yeah.
True. Well, I'm in Chile, and in Chile, you have to. There's like an implied 10%
Oh,
tax, or I
interesting.
mean 10% tip. Yeah.
And you
And I was
happily do it, right?
I mean, I don't happily do it. And as somebody who worked in a bar for many years, I've always had a bit of a weird view when it comes to tipping. I've always thought it's a bit of a, like, at the end of the day, why is the business owner outsourcing this, like the income to the client, when they should be paying the worker his fair share or her fair share? And then if you want to tip on top, that should be fine. But like, why are you compensating or subsidizing like that? I don't know. That's something that we'll leave for another conversation. But
Yeah, I
uh,
think, yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. I really liked it. It was a lot better than a lot of the same, I guess, like whether you're on spaces or on podcasts, people are always like, so how did you get started? Like it's like the same thing. But we talked about like so many different things, and I really appreciate it.
no, this has been brilliant, and I appreciate the words. I'm glad that this has been something different. It's what I'm trying to aim for, at least. And before we go, though, I always ask my guests
Yeah.
the same two questions, which is, what are you reading right now, book wise, and then what book do you usually recommend, or have you found yourself recommending lately? I'm always interested. I'm a huge reader, and I'm always interested by like what journalists are reading, because it's like deeply intertwined.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll leave you with those last two questions.
I just finished reading Free Food for Millionaires by Minjin Lee. She's also the author of Pachinko, which is a really famous novel that ended up being a series. Rich, sorry, not rich. Free Food for Millionaires. It's about a Korean American woman and just like about the dynamics between like immigrant culture and Western culture, and it's just like about a girl like living in New York City. But the interesting thing about it is that it's told in multiple perspectives, and it kind of jumps around. And I feel like a lot of people either really love that or really don't like that. It's like a very Victorian era type of writing, and I really really liked it because you get to like see like inside of or like feel inside of the brain of like a lot of the other characters and what they're feeling, and it really added to the story, I feel. And so I really loved that. When people ask me what book I recommend, it really depends. I mean, I feel like there was a while where I really liked self-help books. Now I'm like leaning more back into fiction, but when I was really like in a self-help, I don't know, I really like the Malcolm Gladwell books, but I would say um, for fiction, there's a book that I really loved like growing up called The Glass Castle. And yeah, I feel like that's my recommendation. So if you ever want to read it, let me know.
Awesome. No, I
Yeah.
definitely will. I'm jotting all these down, and I'm slowly but surely moving my way
What
through
about
this.
you? What did you just finish reading?
I just finished reading Generation of Swine by Hunter S. Thompson.
Is it about
He
pigs?
That's not about pigs,
Oh,
actually. Yeah, for those that are listening, Eric and I have a deep affection for pigs. Um, as you can see from my hat and my name on Twitter, and just like if I see pigs, I find them brilliant. But I'm a huge Hunter S. Thompson fan, and it's
okay.
like Generation of Swine is like his take. He uses the word swine a lot to refer to politicians and just like general
Yeah.
people that he disagrees with. And so it's like a massive riff, or it's a compilation of short articles that he wrote, or short stories that he wrote during like the 80s. So it's Generation of Swine and then Tales of Degradation in the 80s in the US mainly. Um,
So cool.
and
I'll have to check it out.
now, pardon?
I'll have to check it out.
I don't know if you've read anything by Hunter S. Thompson. He's a bizarre man and was quite the character, but he's one of my favorites. I find him one, if not the greatest American writer, like at least top three American writers.
Yeah.
Um, and then when it comes to recommendations, I also struggle a lot with this one because it depends a lot on the person. Because there are people who, like you say, they're only about fiction, or they only like self-care or self-help, stuff like that. But I'm actually reading a book right now that's by one of my favorite authors. That's Bill Bryson, who's a travel writer, and he's like a comedic travel writer. It's called In a Sunburned Country, which is about his travels in Australia. And it literally makes me laugh out loud. And anybody who has ever either been to Australia, I recommend it, or anybody who's thought about Australia, recommend it. And who hasn't thought about Australia in one way or the other, like everybody's seen at least a kangaroo. So that it applies to everybody. But yeah, I can't recommend him enough. Both of those, at least Hunter S. Thompson and Bill Bryson, who are deeply different authors, they're always on my book of recommendations. Um, so yeah, everybody take notes. And yeah, this has been honestly a brilliant conversation, Erika. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we riffed on a lot of just like weird topics and fun topics, and yeah, I'm leaving with a few questions and ideas and things to think about. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I thought it was such a great time, and I'll check out your recommendations. Talk soon. Thank you for
Cool.
listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
See you next week.